Rage and anger had a hold on me, man, and I had a hair trigger, so it was easy to get me to go in.
Welcome to the free sermon podcast of the Potter's House Church in Virginia Beach, affiliated with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Our vision is winning souls, making disciples, and planting churches. It's Tuesday, where you're going to hear a powerful testimony of God's grace revealed in human lives. Each Tuesday, you'll hear Pastor Adam interviewing pastors from around the world to share the mighty miracles that God has done in their lives to give you hope for yours. We share the stories of the men behind the messages you hear every other day on this podcast. Keep in mind that the free version only includes a portion of the whole testimony interview. To listen to the full version, use the links in the show notes to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or supercast.tech. Every dollar goes to supporting world evangelism. Enjoy today's Testimony Tuesday.
Well, hello and welcome back to Testimony Tuesday. This is Pastor Adam with you once again, and you are here for a testimony. We've got one for you. We are so glad to welcome Pastor Deonta Scott from Spring Lake, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure, honor, and a privilege.
Yeah, well, so what our audience doesn't know is that we've had a spiritual battle taking place for the last hour. Yeah, for sure. So we'll spare them the details, but just let you know that the devil didn't want this to happen. We had all kinds of technical difficulties. Absolutely.
But we're here now. God is on the throne, so it's all good.
Amen. All right. So North Carolina, how's things going down there?
It's hot.
It's man. Hot. So weird in February.
Hot. Yes, it was 80 today. So, and I do pest control, so I'm out there in it. So it was a testing day, but hey, it's all good.
So you love hot days. There's lots of bugs come out.
Yeah, my pocket loves it. My body doesn't.
I know about that. Yeah. All right. Well, Deonta, I know you a little bit, but for our audience, why don't you introduce yourself? And for those who don't know you, let us know you and your wife's name and where you're serving and how long you've been there, and give us a report.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Deonta Scott. My wife's name is Faith Scott. And so we have 4 awesome children. We got 2 teenagers, one, so to speak, adult. So she is 18. I'm going to be 19 this year. So we got one graduated from high school already, one about to graduate. We got one that's he's about to be 13 in June, and then our baby girl just turned 10 Sunday. So we got a whole crew going on.
Got the gaggle.
So we're serving here in Spring Lake, North Carolina. I'm assisting, and I'm also the youth pastor here in Spring Lake, North Carolina. So,
oh, that's wonderful. And how long have you been in that post?
So I've been assisting for I think this is my pre-COVID. So this is probably 3rd, 4th year now, assisting, 2nd year, 3rd year doing the youth. And so we are a labor of love with them. And so it's been an amazing time, though, just being back in the mother church and serving, being a blessing to our pastor and his wife and all that we have going on here.
So, yeah, we'll get to this eventually, but you had also pioneered a church. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Oh, yeah, man. Hey, pioneering was great. So I enjoyed pioneering. It and we'll get into this probably a little bit later, but we got sent out in 2000. We got announced in 2013 conference. We actually went to the city. We went to Hope Mills first. Pastor Torrey Williams is my pastor, and so we were the first church plant out of Victory Chapel here in Spring Lake, and so we went out in hit the ground running in 2014 at Hope Mills. My wife, actually, the first week we got into our house there in Hope Mills. Well, let me go back just a little second. So we got announced to go out. I preached my farewell sermon. Our engine on our van blew up. the week or so before we were about to move to Hope Mills. And so I was preaching my farewell sermon, and God told me that somebody in the church was going to give me a van. And so a guy comes up to me, and he's beelining right to me, and God just whispered to me, "That's him." And he was kind of new in the church, and so but they gave me their van on the night I preached my farewell sermon. So we had a van to go, and so we get to Hope Mills, and my wife had to leave to go take care of family matter, and so I hit the ground running. First week I was there when they handed out flyers, and we ended up seeing about 20 people in our house, and then we went from our house to a building in Fayetteville, North Carolina, actually right across the street from where I went to college at. I went to college at Fayetteville State. And so if you know anything about Fayetteville, all you have to say is Murchison Road, or the Merc as they call it. And so that's where we were. And we pioneered an awesome work off of the Merc right across from Fayetteville State. And so it was a fantastic time. When we ended up coming back in, we bought 3 couples with us, and we bought a single lady named Maria and her daughter Katie. We all came over here to Spring Lake together, and so it was fantastic. I enjoyed my time pioneering. It was wonderful.
Praise God. That is fantastic. What a great report. So thank you for that. We, as you know, we should share with the audience that you've been a listener to the podcast for a little while. Why don't you let them know how long?
So I've been listening to the podcast probably for 2 years now. And so it's funny because we were going to Cincinnati last summer. We went to Cincinnati, and my Pastor Ed Chiharo, he's like, "Hey, have you listened to the Testimony Tuesdays? And have you listened to the podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, I listened to it." And so he's like, "No. He's like, "That's only a little bit of it. Have you listened to it?" And I didn't know anything about the premium version. So he's like, "No, you got to get the premium version," because we had listened to the I guess the unsubscribed version, right? And so it cuts off right at the good part. And so he's like, "Nah, man." So we plug his phone in, and I get to listen to the rest of the testimony. I forget who testimony we was listening to, and so I'm right there in the van. I subscribe to the premium, and man, I tell you, we listen to podcasts all the way to Cincinnati from North Carolina and all the way back. So it has been a blessing to my life. I drive for a living, so I do pest control, but I work what they call a out of town route. And so I'm driving most of the time. My closest stop to my house is no less than 30 minutes. So I burn the podcast up, man.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome to hear. It's been a blessing to you. Well, that is great, man. So encouraging. You know, one of the downfalls of podcasting is, I mean, it's great that we can have a conversation like this. It's like a fellowship, you know, and that's why we listen to podcasts. It's almost a form of listening into a fellowship, which is cool. But you know, it's very one-sided as a podcast producer. We don't get a lot of feedback. So like that's wonderful for me to hear that, you know, somebody like you is benefiting from all of these episodes. So thank you for that. We appreciate you.
No problem. Yeah, it has definitely been a blessing for sure.
Awesome. Well, so let's get into your testimony. And so you, as you know, as you've heard before, we like to go back to the beginning where it all started. So tell us about your upbringing and where you grew up.
All right, so I grew up in a small town in North Carolina called Pollocksville, North Carolina. Pollocksville, North Carolina. So I have to say it like that because I got a country twang to me, and so people be like, Pollocksville, or they'll say something weird. So it is Pollocksville. And so don't try to look it up on the map because you probably won't find it. It is literally, if many of you know, go ahead.
I said, I think I've driven through it on the way down to Jacksonville, right?
Yeah, more than likely, probably. And so it is literally maybe 20, 30 minutes outside of Jacksonville, North Carolina. And so, yeah, that's where I grew up at. Very agricultural town, very, very rural. You know, my graduating class, everybody, you know, some people don't even know everybody in their graduating class. Everybody in my graduating class, we knew. It was 70 something of us. And so everybody knew everybody. We had been together since elementary school. So, and nobody really left or came in. It was pretty much the same people my whole, you know, from elementary school on up to high school. So, a very small town. And so, yeah, that's where I grew up. And my mom, there's five of us. And so my mom, pretty much, my mom's a trooper, man. My mom's been taking care of parents, if you will, pretty much my whole life. She's a trooper, and so I say that because we in this small town, jobs and stuff like that are not easy to come by. My mom's one of those folks that when she gets a job, she keeps it. And so when we were from elementary school about to middle school, my mom worked for a school supply company. They closed down. My dad he worked for a moving company, and so he would do long distance moves sometimes. So he'd be gone sometimes for days at the time, and he'd come back home. But and so he died actually on Father's Day of me going into my high school year. Of me going into high school right before that summer, I was going to go into high school the next year, and he got murdered actually at a we call them hole in the walls, and so that's in the country. You don't go to clubs, you go to hole in the wall. So it's normally somebody's house or a barn or something that they've converted. And so people just gather there. Most of the time it's out in a rural place somewhere because, there's drinking and stuff going on. Sometimes you don't want the police to find you. And so my dad was there with his friends, and this guy comes in that nobody really knew. He was drinking with everybody else, got upset. He begins to get in a fight. My dad's a tall, skinny guy. And so, but he was a mover, so he's strong. So the guy was way bigger than him, and so he ended up beating the guy up. The guy says, "I'm gonna go get my gun." He goes to do that, and then so everybody's trying to leave. And as everybody's trying to leave, he starts shooting in the parking lot. My dad's friend's son was at the hole in the wall with them, and my dad runs out. The story goes, my dad runs out to try to get him out of the open. And when he got him out of the open, he picked him up, moved and put him down, and he kept running into a field. And they found him in a field, and so he had got shot with a hollow point right through the heart. So we went through that. Or yeah, we went through that. Like me going right into high school. And so going into high school, I have an older brother. I'm the second oldest. I have an older brother, and I have my sister that's right under me, and I have a baby sister and a baby brother at the time. And so I remember my mom getting the news, and I remember her answering the phone. So we had been to church that day. It was a Sunday. We had been to church, and my mom just collapses on the floor in the kitchen, and we're like, what's going on? And we were kids, so we didn't really understand everything that was going on. And so, I just remember going outside looking at his car, and there was a dove sitting on top of his car. Now, about maybe 8 months or so before that, if I remember correctly, my grandfather had passed. And so right before my grandfather passed, there was a dove sitting on the roof above his window. And so, we were getting all these signs about people passing. It was kind of a strange thing at the time as kids. We didn't understand it all, but that's one of the events I remember during that time. And so from there, family starts kicking in, helping my mom. And my mom was actually taking care of my dad's mom, so to speak, at the time. And then when my dad's mom ended up going into a nursing home, we ended up going to my mom's house, and we moved in with her. And when we moved in with her, she eventually became sick, early onset of dementia, maybe a couple of years after we moved in. And we all took care of her for the rest of my high school years. And so my mom kept us in church, though. We were always in church. I was always in choir. I was always in something in the church. Dramas. I actually wrote a Black History play for the youth group at one point. So, we were always in church, and that's a whole nother story. We were raised in a Baptist church, and so you know how that go. You see all the hooping and hollering and the shouting, and I had never heard anybody speak in tongues before I got in our fellowship, and so my whole perception of that is if you got the Holy Ghost or something, or if you were speaking in tongues, you had to be somebody special. You had to be some anointed person. or you had to be a sister or a mother or a deacon or somebody that of high stature. So I had never heard it before. And so small church, and so my memory of church from that time was, everything is you go to hell. And so that's the perception of the preaching I got. You go to hell if you breathe wrong. You go to hell if you don't do well in school. Everything was like you go to hell, you go to hell. And so I adopted the mindset that, well, if I'm going to go to hell anyway, because it don't matter what you do, it seems like you go to hell. I'm just going to be okay with that, and I'll just live my life. That's kind of the perception I got out of church growing up.
So that kind of built a cynicism inside of you, huh?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. I was one of those people where I wasn't totally. I was religious, so I wasn't necessarily cynic of the gospel. I was just like, okay, this is what it is. You can try to live good if you want, but as long as you're a good person, I thought you will make it in. So I was like, okay, well, I kind of got some wisdom later on. It wasn't all the way right, but I figured if I do good things will come back to me. I didn't categorize that as anything. I didn't, categorize it as like Hinduism or anything. I just figured that's the way it was. And so I just tried to be a nice guy. To be honest, I just tried to be nice. I tried not to, do wrong things. My mom raised us very well. Even to this day, I'm 30. I have to ask my wife to verify, but I think I'm 38. So I still say yes, sir, no, sir, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. That's how we were raised. And so you respect your elders, you do those things. And so I really wasn't, so to speak, a bad kid. Now, what happened to me when my dad passed, I went through a few years of anger. And now that I know what it is, a spirit of anger fell upon me. And so I was a terror of the house for 2 years. Nobody wanted to be around me in my house. Nobody wanted to hang out with me pretty much. I mean, me and my older brother, we hung out. We played video games, but if I lose, I'd get mad. I'd punch holes in walls. I'd throw the controller. I broke a couple things. There's probably still a hole in my grandmother's wall that I put in there under the light socket in my room from punching it because I was losing in Madden. I was playing with the Cowboys, and of course, you know how that goes. And so,
yeah, not great.
Yeah, not great. And so I was, I was mad. I was angry all the time. And so my mom actually ended up putting me on punishment for a year. And back in those days, you couldn't take stuff from kids like cell phones and all that. So it was basically you're going to go to school, you're going to come home. We were active in ROTC. We were active in like football, basketball, and all that. And so in a small town like that, that's all you got. And Walmart. You go to if you're hanging out, you're going to hang out in Walmart parking lot for eons. That's what you do. You don't on Friday nights. You don't go. There's no mall to go to. Everything closes at like 8. So there's nothing to do late at night except for either you're going to go to some hole in the wall, you'll go to somebody's house, or you'll hang out at Walmart in the parking lot. And so that's what we did. We were Walmart warriors. We hung out in the parking lot all night long at Walmart. And so she told me I couldn't go anywhere for a year, and she stuck to it, man. That was the longest punishment of my life. And so I remember it, and my anger took me to the point where she even called the cops on me one time. And so, she almost took me to juvenile and dropped me off one time. And so I was just an angry kid. And so I would fight at the drop of a dime. I got in a fight on the bus, ended up knocking this boy unconscious on the bus, and he wasn't even picking on me. He was picking on my cousin. And my cousin was asleep. I was like, leave him alone. And he was like, no. I'll mess with you too. And he said to me, he said, if you don't watch what you're doing, I'm going to put you in the ground beside your dad. I blacked out. Next thing I know, the bus driver was pulling me off of him, and I'm getting kicked off the bus. Now, the good thing about living in a small town is your name means something in a small town. So my mom had a good reputation in my hometown. Her kids had a reputation of being good kids. So when we went to the principal's office the next day, I didn't get suspended, but he did. And the only reason, and I should have got suspended because I beat him up pretty good. And I probably should have got expelled. I would have for sure got expelled in this day and age. But the principal was like, "Oh well, your mom raised you right. You're a good kid. He for sure had to do something to push you to this point." And they're like, "All right, so we're suspending you," and they just let me go. So, it says something to have a good name.
Yeah, well, that's important. And why don't you explain a little bit for us town folk that grew up in large cities, a little bit more about why this had such a profound effect on your personality and the person that you became?
Absolutely. So, growing up again in a small town, your name means something. So, from that time of me being angry, I used to write poetry a lot. So, I wrote these series of poems called "The Nice Guy," and so I got into this thing where I was like, okay, nice guys always finish last, and all this other stuff. And so I try to adopt this persona, and my older brother, it was a womanizer. And so I looked at his life and I was like, I don't really want to be that. I wasn't confident in myself either. I was a chubby kid, heavyset kid, always been heavyset. And so, I wasn't very confident in myself as far as that goes, because my brother's skinny, he's athletic. And so, he was talking to all the girls and doing all that. So I was like, well, I can't do that. But what I can do is be a good friend. So I was a good friend all throughout high school. And I was always, it's funny how God does things. I was always interested, one girl at the time. It was never, oh, I want to date this girl and sleep with this girl and that girl. I was always like monogamy focused. And so, and if I didn't, and the problem was normally the girl that I liked didn't like me. So, or she didn't know I liked her. And so, that anger ended up again filtering in other areas. So I ended up getting in a couple fights. And sometimes the guys really didn't know why I was fighting them. But normally it was probably because the girl showed them some attention or something to that nature. But I met my cousin, and my cousin was a very upbeat, cheery girl. And she was like, she told me something, and I'll never forget it. She said, you have the ability to choose whether you're going to be angry or not. And that just stuck with me. I think I was a junior at the time in high school. And she says to me, she said, yeah, you can control whether you're going to be angry or not. And I was like, huh. And so she was like, I'm going to get you out of this. And I'm thinking, okay, whatever. But her spirit was infectious. And so I began to break out of that funk, and fast forwarding to now, still in high school, I actually graduated. When I graduated, they give you superlatives. So I ended up getting Mr. Best Personality of all things, out of all things in high school. And then from high school on to college, I just carried on that, hang with everybody, kind of just be everybody's friend. Not really. My wife always says I was nonchalant. And so I embodied it. That's nonchalantness. Like I didn't really have a planned direction, really didn't care too much about, certain things. I would just kind of go with the flow. And so that's kind of how my personality developed into my adult years. I just kind of went with the flow. I went to college because my brother went there. I didn't really have a plan to go to college. I just went to Fayetteville State because my brother went there. And so he ended up leaving me, going into the military. So I was like, I don't really have anything else to do, so I'm going to stay here. So I stayed there and ended up kind of making my own way from that. And that I just kind of kept my personality the same. Beside the anger, instead of anger, I was just, all right, we're going to just go with the flow with life, and then just, it's funny because Pastor Williams always says, man, you were the coolest disciple to ever try to come in this church, because I didn't really care. Like I came, everything had for me, it was just like, it is what it is. That was my statement. That was always my saying. It is what it is. And so I came into the church. I was still in college. And so it's funny because I got witnessed to twice. And so I got witnessed to once when I was dating. Well, I wasn't dating my wife at the time. I was single. And so me, my brother, and my sister, my brother came back from basic, by the way. So he came back and was here in Fayetteville. He got stationed at Fort Bragg. And my sister ended up coming to Fayetteville State as a freshman. And so we were all here in the city of Fayetteville. We were at a Walmart, and this brother, his name was Ron Briggs. And so he comes and he walks in between my brother and sister, and he gives me a flyer to come to church. And this was our church. And, my brother and sister are offended. They're like, oh, what are we? We don't look like Christians. We don't look like we go to church. Like, why did he give it to you? And I didn't think nothing of it. I was just like, I don't know, maybe he didn't see y'all. But they were, they're trying to rationalize this. They're like, no, he had to walk in between us to give you the flyer. I have no idea why this guy gave me the flyer. Fast forward maybe a year or so later, me and my wife are dating. She's coming over my apartment. We're getting groceries out, and we're about to go upstairs. I'm about to cook and do all this. And the same guy, Ron Briggs, comes and gives her a flyer. Now at this time, I'm totally close to the gospel. I did not like church or nothing like that, but I wasn't trying to go. And my wife was. She was my girlfriend at the time. She was trying to get her life right. She was trying to be on the right path, and so we had just kind of started dating. And so she told me, she said, "Well, I'm going to go to this church, and but." She said, you can go. She invited me to go, but I didn't go. I was like, nope, I'm going to work. I ain't got time for that. And so I ended up going to work. She ended up coming, and she loved it. And she ended up getting invited to the pastor's house that night, the first night. And so I tell her, she texts me and tells me that she's going to get invited to the pastor's house. And I'm like, all right, tell me the address, because they don't just do that. I said, and don't drink anything. Because I said, they be trying to give people stuff in them drinks, so don't be drinking nothing. And so,
oh my goodness,
she goes and she tells me about it. She has a great time. And so eventually I'm like, I'll go. And I end up going. And when I get there, it was a new converts class or something they were having. I can't exactly remember. It had to be a new converts class because it wasn't church. And actually the same guy, Ron Briggs, was doing the new converts class. And I sit down and they ask, who wants to read the scripture? And so I'm raising my hand because I've been in church, so I knew how to act. So I'm reading it, and I'm telling you, I fell in love with this church. I fell in love with everybody in there, but I couldn't let my wife know that because I was still cool and I was trying to be hard. So she asked me afterwards. She's like, "How was it?" Well, it was all right. We can still look around, but it was all right. So trying to be hard, but I knew from that point on that I was going to stay in this church, in this fellowship. So,
wow, that's pretty powerful. Well, so I want to go back just a little bit to what you described when you were younger, that when your father was murdered, that has to have a profound impact on you. So I wonder if maybe it sounds to me like you were processing that through the anger, that you got getting in fights and stuff like that. But can you describe maybe a little bit more of what it was like for you to process through all of that, and where how do you think about it to this day?
Okay, so back then I did not process it properly 100% because I didn't understand it. The man who killed my father was way older, and so we actually recently got a letter asked because he's up for probation. It's not funny, but it's a coincidence. I honestly thought he had passed away already. So because like I said, he was already older when this happened, but I never developed a hatred for the guy. I just never develop this hatred for him. I was just mad at life. I think I was just mad because my dad wasn't there. It's those things that you don't know. You don't know you need your dad until, you're faced with the situation of girls and, are you adequate enough? What should you do in certain situations? Just all that dads do. I started football. Right. And so in high school, I played football. I was nose tackle. And then I also played on the offensive line for a very brief period of time. They ended up leaving me a nose tackle. But I ended up developing allergies to grass. And so in the country, ain't nothing but grass. So fresh cut grass will swell my eyes up like golf balls. And so my mom was like, yeah, you can quit because, I don't want you to have swollen eyes and all this other stuff. Looking back, had my dad probably been there, he probably been like, suck it up, put some water on it. Because that's the thing in the country, water solves everything. You put water on it and you keep playing.
Just a little water, huh? That's it.
Yeah, water. That was if your leg breaks and your bone is hanging out, they'll tell you to put water on it. It'll be okay. I remember getting a little boo-boo when I was a kid because you play in the dirt and rocks all the time. And so you get scratched up pretty good. So I had a big old cut on my leg. I go tell my dad, and my dad pours beer on it. He's like, all right, you're good, go play. So that's the mentality. But yeah, that's again, just not processing it properly. I needed my dad. I needed a dad. I needed a man to help me get through those years, because like I said, I was going into high school. High school is when the girls come. High school is when the macho stuff comes and all this, and so just not processing it properly, and not processing what and all is going on in life. So I think that's where the anger really boiled down to. And actually, I didn't say this, but I'm going to say it now. So my mom actually started dating a guy. I'm terrible with times as far as like years, but my mom started dating this guy maybe 2 years or so after my dad had passed. And I ended up, so this guy is a nice guy, great guy. He ended up developing sickness. I think it was cancer of some kind, and he ended up passing maybe a few years after my mom started talking to him. But he was a nice guy. He stayed in Greenville, which was again, Greenville's 30 minutes the other way from where we live. And so this guy would come down and see my mom every Friday. He began to take on dates and stuff. And so it finally comes a time for us to meet his kids. And my mom is like, okay, she explains to everybody, she sits us down, hey, we're going to go on this outing, that Bernard was the guy's name. Bernard is going to take us, with his kids are going to be there. So we're all going to meet. And so this guy, man, he sets up a day. We go out, we go to Pizza Hut. This is the first thing we do. We meet there, we go to Pizza Hut. He takes us, he treats everybody, pays for everything. We go to the arcade. We play in the arcade all day. And then, and so the whole time though, him and my mom are trying to be, cutesy and hold hands and walk and just do all the things that, a dating couple does. Well, they had a guy named Deonta in the way. Everybody else was being normal. Everybody else was doing their own thing. Even my little brother, my little sister, they were doing their own things. Deonta was being the police for his mom. This guy would try to hold my mom's hand. I'm coming in between them, smacking hands apart. Like I'm the pest, man. I'm not having fun. I'm policing. I'm watching her. So if he tries to put his arm around, I'm coming getting in between them. If they try to go off to the side of, I'm right there. I'm like stuck to it, like white on rice. Like, nope, you ain't gonna have my mom. And so, so we do all, I do all that stuff. He ends up, after the arcade, he ends up taking us to Burger King. Now this man has already treated, because my mom has 5 kids and he has 3. So, and plus the adult. So he has treated everybody all day long. Then he takes us to Burger King after the arcade. And so we go there, and my mom tells everybody, she said, look, stay in the van. We're going to get y'all something to drink. We'll be right back. What does Deonta do? Deonta does not stay in the van. My older brother at the time was like, listen, man, why you just can't listen? Just do what mom said, stand there. And I was like, no, I got to go check on something. And he's like, you don't got to go check on anything. You're just trying to be nosy. He's like, you need to chill. Stay in the van. I'm like, no, I'm going out there. So I go in there. In my mind, I saw them by the bathroom kissing. In my mind, I saw this. I walk into the Burger King. I see this. And I kick in the bathroom door, the men's bathroom door, because I'm now enraged. And this is the first time I ever felt rage. I didn't know what that was, but this is the first time I ever felt rage. And so I'm going somewhere with this. This is the first time I ever felt the spirit of rage on me. I didn't know what it was as a kid, but I go in the bathroom, I kick the door, and I remember vividly there's a guy in there using the bathroom. He's using the bathroom, the urinal, and he jumps to the side. I don't know if he was finished or what, but he jumped to the side because I kicked the door so hard. I go in there and I'm like, man, I can't believe he's kissing my mom. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get away from me so he could kiss my mom and blah, 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 blah. So I'm going off in this bathroom. I said, I got something for him. So I go out there. Now, mind you, I just saw them in my mind kissing at the corner of the bathroom. They're at the checkout counter, paying and waiting for the drinks. They're talking. They're not even arm's length close to each other. I go around the corner. I saw what you did to my mom, and I mount this dude like from behind, and I just start welling on him. And he's not a tall guy, but he's a stocky guy. He used to be a wrestler. I found this out later on. He used to be a state champ wrestler in high school. And so I'm jumped on this guy, man, and I'm just pounding him in Burger King. My mom, who was like 4 foot nothing, my mom grabs me by the collar. She body slams me in Burger King and drags me out of the Burger King, one-handed. And so that's when I knew my mom wasn't nothing to play with. She always told us stories about how she beat guys up, but I didn't believe it until that day. And so my anger had taken me to that point that I was willing to fight an adult, which was totally out of my character, totally out of anything that I would ever do. So that, like I said, rage. And so my mom is we drive home. I done ruined the day for everybody. His kids are in the car. And I had to sit beside one of his sons. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, this kid going to try to fight me because I just jumped on his dad. He doesn't. And so we end up going home. My mom tells everybody to get out the car. She tells me to apologize to this guy. I've never been defiant to my mom ever before this. Never been indignant to my mom. It's always, we kids, so we'll talk back here and there, but we always get corrected and whatever. My mom told me to apologize to this guy, and I would not do it. Like, I was like, no, you can beat me, you can do whatever. I'm not going to do it. And so that's the first time I remember how good, and it felt good to be rebellious. It felt good to have this rage. It felt good to be angry. It felt good. Like, I felt like I had this power, like I had this ability that, no matter what, my mom can't even make me act right. And so I kept that. And so I kept that up until the point, like I said, I met my cousin. I kept that. I was that way. My mom should have kicked me out of the house several times. My mom should have called the police on me several times because I was just out of control with that. I wasn't violent all the time, but I would feel that rage come. And when I would feel that rage come, it was nothing you could do. I remember one time I get so mad, I grabbed the curtains and I put the curtains around my neck and I'm like, kill me. And I'm doing all this stuff and I'm not registering what I'm even doing. Right. But it's demonic manifestations. Now that I know what I know now, I know that's what it was. But rage and anger had a hold on me, man. And I had a hair trigger, so it was easy to get me to go in.
Yeah, wow. I'm wondering if you can speak to that because this is still a huge problem with many, many, especially young men in this generation.
Yes.
And
yes.
Generally, what it means to grow up means to get a handle on your sexuality and also on your anger. Mm-hmm. So can you talk to those young men or to pastors who are dealing with young men or parents of those young men, and how do we help them overcome that?
Absolutely, 100%. To be honest, in that time and that knowing what I know now, I don't think they got to be in a place to receive it because I wasn't. Like, you got to have patience. A lot of times nowadays, what I've noticed and just listening to other podcasts and stuff like that, one of the things that I've heard is that, and it's very true, we don't teach our kids anything. We tell them what to do. We tell them to do this, but we don't actually teach them. We don't take the time to teach them because life is busy. We just need you to get it. And so, and we don't have time for you to mess up several times. We don't have time to tell you, oh, do this again. We don't have time. I got in my house, I tell my kids, get up, wash your face, brush your teeth, get ready for the day. That's the first three things you should be doing. Well, when you have to tell a kid that every day, and then when you check behind them, they're not doing it. Parents either get tired of doing it or they just don't do it. They say, oh, that kid just a lost cause, and they don't worry about it. They don't keep the main thing. What I've had to tell myself is I can't get tired of telling my kid the same thing. Yes, they don't know. Yes, they're going to mess up. Yes, long suffering. The Bible tells us we're going to long suffer. That's part of love. That's part of what love is. Love is long suffering. And so you have to be able to suffer along with your children. And thank God I had a mom who was willing to suffer along with me. My mom had us in church, like I said, my whole life. And so my mom was really that image for me. My grandmother was the first Christian I ever saw, legit Christian, but my mom was that foundation looking back. And so pastors dealing with the youth I have here, man, they got some testimonies, man, that'll make you cringe. My testimony is nothing compared to these kids. Some of them, 14 years old, they're drug dealers and all this other stuff. And so, they've been through life. They live life by 15. Like at 15, there's nothing left for them to do but get saved. There's no, because they've done everything else, and so you have to learn to suffer along with your kids. You have to be patient. You have to be willing to have those conversations. My second oldest daughter is very strong-willed. And so dealing with strong-willed children is a thing. So I'm one of those where I have time. I'll wait. I've stood in the bathroom because, you discipline your child. Pastor Williams used to put on Reb. I don't know if you've ever seen that Reb Sunday school series.
Yeah, Reb Bradley. That's right.
Yeah. He's like, all right, little Johnny, I'm going to give you 3 licks. And so I was kind of trying to do my version of Reb. And so I would tell my daughter, okay, hey, you did this, you're going to get 3 lashes, or you're going to get 5, 5, I call them licks. You're going to get 5 licks. And we would go in the bathroom, and I would always be like, okay, because, Reb said you got to spank them on the square on the bottom, right? And so I was always careful, especially with my girls, not to like crazy spank them. I never wanted to hit them, in other places other than their butt. So, I would tell her turn around, and she would not. She had that same thing I had, where she's gonna be indignant. She's not gonna do it. It don't matter what you do. You can tell her a million times, she's not gonna do it. And so I would stand there and say, okay, and every minute you don't do it, that's a extra lick. And I remember one time we got up to 30 something licks. She remembers the story. She actually talked about it not too long ago. And she finally turns around after I get to 30, 31, somewhere up in there. And she got all 30, 31. And so but you have to be consistent. They have to know, hey, if you give them a punishment, you're going to stick to it. Can't be no waffling. Kids that deal with anger, they need that. For me, especially, I needed that whatever my mom said she knew she had to stick to that year-long punishment, because if she didn't, I would have pushed over after that. So she stuck with it, and she enforced it, and there was no get out of it. It didn't matter what I did. I couldn't buy my way out of that one. I couldn't, do enough good things to get time. It was no get out of jail free card with her. It was, okay, you're going to serve this year. And so that's what kids need nowadays. A lot of these kids, people don't have time for them. And so and we do frontline youth here, is what we call our youth ministry. And so my biggest thing with them is I want to make it more than just, okay, I come and I preach to you. No, I want to get involved in your life. I want to know what's going on. Okay, if you got a baseball game or something like that, we want to support you. We had a family here, some boys, they boxed. We tried to make as many of their boxing matches as we could. When they graduate, we're celebrating. Birthdays, we celebrate it. Because these small things, these kids don't get. And I credit a lot of that to my wife, because my wife's very intentional in that way. And so I've learned a lot from her in that area. She's very intentional to celebrate people. And so, she's always making sure that gets done. And so, yeah, that's if I could give any advice, that would be it. Learn to long suffer, learn to be patient with these teens in that area, and just don't be their friend. You don't need to be their friend. This generation has told adults, we got to be their friend. I'm not your friend. I tell my kids that all the time. I'm your dad. I'm not going to be your friend. You're not going to like me, and guess what? That's okay. But I'm going to be your dad. And that's how I was raised. My mom would say that to me. Yeah, you may not like me, but I'm going to be your mom. And so I think kids need that.
Yeah. Your children are not your accessory. They're not the reason for
Absolutely.
your being. You are supposed to play a role. Absolutely. So it sounds like your cousin had a lot to do with you being able to get over that. And she gave you that revelation that you are able to decide what kind of attitude you're going to have in life. And what a powerful revelation that was. So talk about how, well, you mentioned when you first got a flyer, you were not so hot about going to church. So
nope, not at all.
How did you, you wanted to be the nice guy. You kind of demonstrated that through high school, but talk about what was happening in your spiritual life, coming up out of the church environment, grown up, being involved with everything that was happening there. So why were you turned off to the church life and maybe even the gospel?
Good question. Glad you asked. So somebody listen to the podcast. My church gonna get that. So anyway, but yeah. So no. So going to that little Baptist church that I was going to, it wasn't so little, but it was a it's a small town. So we had a pastor there, and again, not being ignorant, that wasn't the reality. Everything he preached wasn't you're gonna go to hell, but that was all I heard as a kid. But anyway, so we went there, and the church actually started growing, and it's funny because his vision for the youth was for the youth rather. He started to realize that the adults wanted things to stay the same, and he knew that God is not a monument, God is a movement. And so you can't just stay the same. We can't just keep singing these same songs out of the hymn book. It's okay. We're going to throw Kirk Franklin in here. We're going to throw, some Ty Tribbett in here. It's okay. We're going to throw some of this other stuff in here, and it'll be okay. And we'll let the young people take that. Well, the adults didn't like that too much. So I verified this, with my mom some time ago because I had to preach about it. But I told so basically it got to a point where my pastor at that church at the time was beginning to really invest in the youth, and so he would take us to his preaching engagements. Like so, in the Baptist church, a lot of times the pastors, if they have a good choir, and we did, you would take the choir with you. When you went to preach at other churches, it wasn't their song service that did the service. You basically infiltrated their church and you took over. And so he was beginning to take the kids because the kids were the ones that were showing up. The youth were showing up, and our parents, of course, credit to our parents. Our parents were showing up and taking us. And so I was getting drugged around the church a lot, and so with the choir and all this. And so long story short, something happened. I can't 100% know factually what happened because, again, I was around 14 or so at the time. So I don't 100% know. But I remember one Saturday, we normally have choir practice on Saturday mornings. We end up going to church on a Saturday, and my mom begins to explain to us on the way over there that, hey, this when you guys get there, there's going to be a meeting, and they're going to say some stuff. Just be prepared, don't react. But they're trying to vote out the pastor, basically what she got to. And so she said, we all y'all are members, so your vote counts, no matter what they say. And we want to keep him. And so we go there, and it's like a sheep going to the slaughter, man. All the kids and the youth are on one side of the fellowship hall, all the adults and the people that have been there forever on the other side. And I remember the doors opening, the pastor and his wife coming, they're walking down, and it's a crazy thing to see. It's like a movie in my head, but and they walk down and they sit at the head table, and then they begin to bring all these accusations against them. Oh, you took money, you did this, you did this. They're going over we call it a gold sheet, but they're going over the budget. They're talking about where all these funds have been allocated to and who didn't get paid and all this stuff. And him and his wife, as far as I remember, don't say a word. And they end up taking a vote. We won the vote for him to stay. There was more of us, but then they started saying, oh, well, these kids aren't members and they haven't been back, and all this other legal stuff that they're trying to get into. And I remember him getting up with his wife and basically saying, we're not going to stay here. And they leave, and that was it. And that turned me off from church because I began to think to myself, oh, if this is what church is, people do this in the streets. We do this in the streets. We talk about each other. We turn our backs on each other. If that's what church is, I'm good. I don't want to be a part of that. So I ended up, kind of, we would still have to go because my mom would make us, but because that church went in a downward spiral, so to speak. Even to this day, the youth have never returned to that church. They don't have a youth scene in that church. And at the time, that was what the church was. It was a heavy youth presence, a lot of vibrant. There was life, because if you got youth, you got life, because there's expectation for the future if you got youth. And so to this day, that church does not have youth in it. So a lot of those same old people are still there if they haven't passed. So, and so that's what really turned me off from church. Seeing how people acted, these people that, were worshiping and saying all these good things about the pastor outwardly, but then we go in this meeting behind closed doors where kids more than likely shouldn't have been, but because of what was going on, they needed our vote to help. And even still, it didn't. And so that's what really turned me off from church. I went a couple times, like I said, I never went on my own though after that. And then Ron comes along, give me this flyer, and I knew I wasn't going. And so my wife at the time, so we make this thing. We're like, okay, we need to get our lives together if we're gonna want this relationship to go forward. And so my wife, well, she was my girlfriend at the time. She says, well, we're gonna go to church, and I was like, okay, cool. I've been thinking about that, wanting to go. So we ended up together. We were supposed to go to this church. Well, my wife didn't want me to go, so we got up, we got dressed, and all this. Again, we're not married, so I actually went to my apartment that night because we're trying to do right, so worldly as you can in the world. So we're just not, we'll sleep together, but I'm not gonna stay here. I'll just go to my apartment, So I went to my apartment and I got dressed, and I come to our house, which was here in Spring Lake. I lived in Fayetteville at the time, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to church." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're going to church." She said, "No, I'm going to church." She's like, "You're not going to church with me." I was like, "What do you mean? Like, we agreed on this." She's like, "I'm not taking you in there." She knew she knew I wasn't right. She knew my motives weren't right, and so she ends up going to church by herself. So that day, I end up going to a church, just out of spite, out of anger, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna show her that I'm serious about this. And so I end up going to a very popular black church here in Fayetteville, very well known and still active and alive today. And I remember going in the parking lot, and nobody's talking to me, nobody's saying anything. It's a fashion show, all these nice cars, everything going on, and I was just like, I'm not feeling this. So I left, and I went, and I'm driving around town just trying to go to a church. I didn't care which one. I just had to prove to her that I was going to go. And I get to this one church, and it's a small church, just kind of looks like the church I had back home, because that was the thing in my mind. I have to find a church like I had back home. And so I get out, and two people come out, and they're like, "Hey," and they made me feel like the most welcomest person. The sermon was the worst sermon I ever heard. The pastor was begging the people, to just do stuff in his sermon. Honestly, it's funny because he was talking about coming to the church for morning prayer and just praying. And so and all this, I remember that. And he was talking about how he would get in his car and cry out to God, and his neighbor would think it was crazy and called his wife and asked him what does he be doing every morning when he's in the car leaving and all this other stuff. So I remember the sermon being about that, and I'm like, who does that? Who gets up at 5 a.m. and goes to morning prayer at the church? Who does that? And I was like, no wonder this guy ain't got nobody following him. Nobody wants to do what he's trying to do. And so, but I sit through that service, and the people were very nice, but I never went back to that church. So the next time me and my wife actually do end up going to a church together, and I'm saying all this to kind of piece it together, how God made what we do in our fellowship come together in all of this journey that I had of going back to church. So that was that church. He's talking about morning prayer. The next church we go to, the first service we go to, the pastor's talking about how they starting this building project, and they bought this land. They're going to build this church on this land, and he's taking pledges. And I'm like, man, see, I knew it, because coming from the church I came from, you have 3 and 4 offerings. And so I'm like, okay, so he just wants money. And so they pass us, the slip to write down our pledge. And I'm like, I knew it. And so I wasn't going to go back to that church either, but they used to do dramas before the preaching every service. And the dramas were very good. And so I like drama. So I was like, okay, we can stay here for a little while. So we stayed there for a little while, but the offering. He kept talking about the vision. Then he starts showing this high-tech church on the screen and how they need money for it. And I'm just like, I'm not down with this either. So I stopped going to that church. My wife keeps going for a little while. And she ends up getting a flyer. Like I said, we get the flyer the second time at my apartment together. She ends up going to Victory Chapel here in Spring Lake. And then I come sometime after that, and I fell in love with it, like I said, at that new converts class. And that's how we ended up here. So all those in that church, actually, who the pastor was taking that offering for and did all that, several years later, that pastor, everything he was preaching about and talking about came to pass. They still have a vibrant church today in our city. The church has a good testimony in the city. And so, so to say, one of the things we hear people say in the fellowship, sometimes people can get to the point where they're so fellowshipy that they don't think that any other church is doing has vision and doing the things that we're doing. That church is doing it in our city, and everything that pastor was talking about came to pass. I just was not in a place to receive it, and but I know that God was setting all that up, because all those things that these churches that I was going to was talking about, was everything that we are as a fellowship. And so just seeing them trying to get people to come to outreaches and do all these things that we take for granted, that we do so easily and we do with our eyes closed sometimes. These churches are literally sometimes begging members to do it. And, that's how I ended up here, and I began to see the vision for what we got. So it makes sense now why God kind of let me go to these places, because you start piecing it together and you're like, oh, okay, that's why I heard that sermon, or that's why, oh, this was going on and that was going on, because God was setting me up to be in this fellowship. So
Okay, so I would like to ask you, you've talked a lot about your relationship with the church, and
yeah.
I'm wondering, what was your relationship with God? Like, had you ever had a personal experience with God in church? And even when those times
No.
when the church turned you off, was God ever, made himself real in your life? Or did it finally happen when you eventually came to Victory Chapel?
No, it 100% happened when I came to Victory Chapel. So in the church I was going to, the Baptist church I was going to, the pastor didn't have this spirit, but the church had this spirit. There was a lot of carnal people in the church. Knowing what I know now, and it's been proven, because that pastor over the years, his testimony is still good. He's still married to the same wife. A lot of people, like I said, in a small town, you end up finding out who people are. He wasn't that, and so he ended up branching out of that fellowship, and he started his own, and from the ground up, and he's doing very well. And a lot of people that were working with the youth at the time have actually gone with him. And so, but for me personally, no, I did not have a relationship with God. I got baptized because I wanted a Bible with the gold letters with my name on it. So I got baptized for that reason. Everything was a show. It wasn't. There was never anything that was, oh, I need to do this for God. It was always for to be seen. When I got baptized, like I said, I wanted that Bible, and I wanted to get the stuff that everybody else gets when they go up there. When you say stuff like, oh yeah, I feel like God wants me to do this or whatever, but I didn't know what I was talking about. And so I would go up. I did that. I got baptized for that reason. I was in the choir. I could sing pretty good for my age. And so I was probably the only boy that was either brave enough or wanted to do it. I don't know exactly the reason, but I would end up doing what I call the headline songs. So when they wanted somebody to imitate Kurt Franklin or Todd Tribbett or somebody of that nature, those were the type of songs that I did, because I would perform. And and Pastor Campbell says it now. I had never heard it. I had said it to myself, but I had never heard anybody actually say it out loud, and I had never said it out loud. But I had this thing where I was humbly proud, and so I would do what we call choir anniversaries. I would do these, and I would sing like I said, the last song, which is normally supposed to be the best song, and I would wait for people to come to me and tell me how good of a job I did. Now, I didn't put this out there like I wanted that, because I was humble, right, on the outside. And so, but I wanted that. I wanted people to come to me and tell me how good I did and all this stuff. And so I craved that. I needed that, for validation or whatever. And so that's what it was for me in the church. So I never had an experience with God. Everything was for a show. It was for a reason, to feed ego, for pride reasons. It was never really, oh, I need to get saved. I need to live for God. It was none of that. And I came into Victory Chapel, and it was preached about. It was talked about. So just a lesson to young pioneer pastors: don't get up there trying to preach deep, heavy, revy. You need to preach stuff that is simple for people to eat. You need to give them that baby food. Tell them why it's important to go to the altar. Tell them why it's important to give your life to Jesus. Tell them why it's important not to be watching rated R movies. Tell them why it's important to when you read your Bible, to start in John and then go to Matthew and then read the New Testament, and don't start in Revelations like everybody tries to do and get super spiritual or get freaked out. You need somebody to tell you why you're doing these things, because if not, you won't get a right perspective. And I think that's what was going on. There was no discipleship, and I'm a person, just knowing myself now, all these years later, I needed discipleship. I needed someone to lead me and guide me, and it couldn't be a woman, because in the Baptist church, that was what it was. Everything was women led. The pastor preached, yes, we didn't have women preachers because they didn't do that, but it was very, very like, the ladies did a lot of things, and they were, especially with the kids, they were the ones with hands on the kids. That's why it's so amazing that I've been blessed to work with kids, because they need that. They need that male authority in their lives a lot of times, leading them and showing them, hey, no, you're not going to do that in here. You want to do that in here, you're out of here. So I didn't have that. I didn't have that in the church that I was going to. And so, when I got here, that was a thing. We had Pastor Marvin Burley actually when I first got here, and he was a jovial guy. He was more laid back, and he was very always wanting to fellowship, play games and stuff like that. But when Pastor Williams came, it was a totally different ball game, And so that's when I really started getting discipled, and so that's what I needed. So that's why I didn't have an experience with God in that church I was in. I just wasn't looking for it, and that there was really no discipleship model to lead me to that. Nobody came and talked to you and confronted you at your seat with the gospel. It was just, we're going to open the altars and people come down, and a lot of it was for people to fall out and put on a show. It was not really, it wasn't a lot of things going on down there like we see now at our churches.
Man, that's powerful. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to say goodbye to our free subscribers. And so if you want to hear the rest of this story about, man, there's a lot that God did with you. I want to hear about how the church transformed, that you got to be a witness of that there in Spring Lake. I want to hear about your discipleship journey and how you decided you wanted to be a preacher. So if you want to hear the rest of that story, you got to go hit that subscribe button. And so we're going to take a quick break. And for our premium subscribers, we will be right back.